well, first I got a job at a Kroger, and I lasted 2 weeks there. And
Did you cuss somebody out? I'm just picturing you being insubordinate at the grocery store.
I was definitely the checkout guy that people were like, he was rude, so that happened more than once.
Shocking.
Oh, Evan, you owe me a Frosty beverage.
So anyway, I worked at this video store, and it had a huge porn room, and it was always really weird to go back there and like stack. So anyway, there was this one fucking douchebag asshole who always came in, and there were 3 price tiers at the store. There was like the new releases, which I think were $3.99, the old stuff, which was 99 cents, and then the porn, which was like $5.99 maybe. And he would always get like one new movie, one old movie, and porn. And so we had this deal that if you rented 3 movies, you always got the third one free. But of course, it was supposed to be the least expensive one. One day he's, I'm checking him out, and he gets a free movie because he's got 3 movies. So I take the 99-cent movie off you're supposed to, and I tell him the total. And he says, quote, "How about you work that out to my advantage instead of yours?"
Oh.
And so I said, what would you like free, the new release or the porn? So...
Welcome to Spoiler Peace Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Cree, and I'm editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BAFTA and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
My name is Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer and film critic, editor of Bitchflix, and a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly, sort of, because they're not doing freelance right now.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people who are in that boat, but I'm also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
And you are listening to episode 300 of Spoiler Peace Theater. So
Sorry.
So we're celebrating that, but we also have a very special guest that's joining us for this episode. My co-host in life.
Yay!
My wife. Attorney Harris.
Your wife and attorney?
I believe it's Shauna Harris, Esquire. Hi, Shauna.
Hi.
Hi, what's up?
Probably my cholesterol based on what I've been eating the past 2 weeks, but,
Right.
Otherwise, not
Oh, have you been eating boxed mac and cheese every day, too?
No,
Trust
but
me.
I did make some snickerdoodles the other day, but I only baked about half of them, and then I ate the rest of the dough.
Oh, my God. That's like what I did with brownies. I made fudge brownies and, I ate a lot of the dough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
I ate a tray of macaron rejects today. So
Nice.
We both did.
yeah.
We both took one
I
for
know
the
how it
team on that
goes.
one.
yeah, it's fine.
Yes, there's definitely been some baking, as I'm sure many of you are, as you're sheltering in place, as we currently are for episode 300. But we've got some movies and some TV to talk about. On this week's show, we're going to talk about a Netflix docuseries, How to Fix a Drug Scandal. And Shauna is going to provide her expertise on that. We are going to be talking about St. Francis. We're going to be talking about The Other Lamb and a title that I will probably butcher. Never, rarely, sometimes, always. Did I get it correct?
You did. Good job.
Oh, thank God. This is one of those titles you're like, I'm pretty sure I'm saying the words in the wrong order here. I'm
you
always
did it.
rarely getting this wrong. Sometimes, maybe,
But not never.
but not never. Yes. Okay, I got it right. So first, we're going to talk about The Other Lamb. Is that right, Megan?
Yes.
Cool. Tell us about that movie.
Okay, so The Other Lamb is fantastic, and I cannot wait for when you guys all see it because I think this is such a fantastic film. It's a film in a very dreamlike state, very nightmarish. There are a lot of times I don't like the usage of montages in a film, and this film utilizes montages perfectly and just to maximum effect. And the premise of the film is it's about a girl in a cult. And it's a it's a, as so many of them are, it's a religious cult. And
You piqued my interest.
you're like, done, I'm going out watching it right now. And it's about a girl who's in this cult, and it's all women, and they're all either the wives or the daughters of this one dude. And
Whoa.
One dude?
one dude, yeah. So it's about like 15 to 20 women and girls who are in this cult with him. And he's the leader, and he's called the shepherd, and he makes, of course, all the decisions. And when the film opens, you see women singing, you see women outside sewing, you see them chopping wood, you see them skinning animals, you see them doing all of the work, and you eventually see this dude who is just sitting back and, you know, watching all the women do everything. Kind of like in, you know, a patriarchy, as you know, as does happen. But yeah, so the film
Sitting back and taking all the credit.
yeah, exactly, you know, as one does. But this film really is it's directed by Malgorzata. I'm gonna probably massively mispronounce her last name, Zumovska, and she really explores the manipulation, exploitation, and misogyny within cults, or certainly within this cult, and if not probably all of them. And it really explores the loss of innocence of this one girl named Sela. And it's right before she's gotten her period, and her period is a point in the film that occurs, and everything is, once she gets her period, which is seen as impure and awful, and she has to like hide herself away with this cursed wife who, you know, tries to inform her about how not everything is so great, and the guy is pretty much an asshole. But Sela doesn't really want to believe it because she still thinks he's great, and she thinks this life is great. But very early on, you start to see these images of her looking at dead animals. Like she sees a dead bird, and the camera zooms in, and you see like maggots on it, and then you see a wounded sheep, and you see a dead lamb that's skinned, and it's like so disturbing. And so a lot of, you know, dead animal imagery, a lot of blood, a lot of water imagery, all of these, I mean, not the dead animals per se, but, you know, the blood and the water are very kind of, you know, stereotypically or mythical feminine kinds of imagery. And so it's all about her observing all of these things, and as you know, she's, like I said, getting her period. And then the reason why her getting her period is such a big deal is because then she is essentially ready for the shepherd to claim her, as it were. And so
I
as
was
a,
worried you were gonna say that.
yeah, unfortunately. So as this film goes on, like the women are working, and then they have to find a new home because there's a cop that comes and tells them, like, basically, you don't really know what exactly is going on because you see everything from Sela's vantage, and she can't quite hear the conversation. But basically, they're not where they're supposed to be. They're trespassing. So they have to go and find this new home. So all of the women have like backpacks strapped to their backs, and the dude, of course, is carrying nothing. And he's like, we have to keep going on, and we have to find the right place. And, you know, we're being tested, and you have to have faith. And one of the women goes into labor early. She's pregnant, and she dies. And this woman who is one of the wives, who is called the cursed wife because she's kind of separate from everybody else, she decides she's going to leave. She's like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. And Sela asks her, like, you know, why? You know, where are you going? And she's like, I'm taking the baby. And she's like, I thought the baby had died. And she's like, no. And you find out that the reason the shepherd told all the women and girls that the baby died is because it's a boy, and only one male can be allowed, of course. So, yeah. And before she leaves, she tells Sela, you know, remember that you're, you know, much stronger than you think. And she'd also had a conversation with Sela where she's like, you know, his attention is like the sun. It's bright and glorious at first, but then it just burns. And, you know, trying to she keeps trying to impress upon her that, this is not normal. This is not a good thing. And it's interesting because Sela throughout the film keeps sounding like she really wants to, be with the shepherd, but everything, all the imagery and all the looks on her faces and all the way the camera frames things, it's very clear that she knows somewhere inside her that this is just fucked up and wrong. And she knows that this is not the way it's supposed to be, because as they're journeying on to their new home, you see this interesting scene where you see Sela in modern clothes. Because that's the other thing too, I forgot to tell you. They all wear like these old-timey clothes, and the daughters wear like blue and the wives wear red. It's very Handmaid's Tale in its color scheme, which is kind of creepy in and of itself too. But so in this scene, Sela's wearing like a Letterman's jacket and she's wearing very modern clothes, and she looks out the window and she sees the kind of caravan like walking, and then she mouths out the window, "What are you doing?" And then the quote real Sela is like watching this car, so she's like imagining herself what she would be like in a modern setting. And so it's basically all about the erosion of her paradigm and knowing that this is all fucked up. And so it keeps going on like this. And then, like there's this great montage of her screaming, and she's like has blood on her face. And later you see her putting blood on her face like war paint. And you see an image of all the women like attacking the shepherd. And that eventually does come true because...
Sweet.
Yeah, because one of the young women, who's a daughter, she says, "I think I see something over there." And he like flips out. He's like, "Oh, you think you can lead? You think you can lead?" And he starts kicking her and hitting her. And he's like, "Get up, get up." And she won't get up. She's just crying. And he's like, "You're pathetic. You could never be mine." And so Sela's like had it. And so she goes up to the woman and she's like, "This is not okay." And yeah, and it just... the misogyny just keeps going and just comes to a head, and the women eventually, some of them revolt. And this movie is so good, and it's gorgeous cinematography, great acting, and I just loved it.
Sounds intense though.
It is intense. Yeah.
Like the dead animal imagery and all that stuff, the flashes sounds like it's not mother-in-law viewing material. Yes, anything with dead animals is generally not recommended viewing.
Yeah, I would say no.
But I want to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, this is so good. And this is a film that I want to tell everybody about, because it's a film I feel like I've seen a few reviews here and there, but I feel like not enough people are talking about. So yeah, I definitely want everybody to watch this because it's so great.
Mm-hmm. Where is it available for people to see?
It is available to rent on streaming on VOD. So yes, that is where people can see it.
Yeah, that's probably something I should have mentioned again at the top of the show, is that we're continuing to cover streaming titles through the coronavirus.
Yes.
Shut down, sit in, stay at home time.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you could go to a movie theater, but you'd be sitting there. Actually, that might be a good place to fucking quarantine. All the popcorn you can eat and, candy, and there's probably no one else there. So...
I mean, if your theater is open, yeah.
I mean, who's to say it's not open if you find a brick? So,
yeah,
I mean, I'm not suggesting anyone do that, but
like zombie movie style, like Night of the Comet or something. Just like wander into the empty movie theater and like hang out while everyone else's like powdery corpses lay on the floor.
Exactly.
I always confuse Night of the Comet with Miracle Mile. I always have to be like, wait, which one is which? Yes. But
those movies could not be more different.
I know. But for some reason in my head, they are the same. I don't know why.
Miracle Mile is like one of the greatest movies of all time.
I love Miracle Mile.
I love Miracle Mile.
I was just defending that to someone who said it was garbage. I was like, no, it's amazing. You're wrong.
That person is incorrect, whoever that person is.
Well, you know that person, so anyway. But I digress.
Wrong. So when you scream at them next time you see them without any context, the first thing you do. Wrong.
Yeah. After we're done here, you can tell me off mic who it is, and I'll go out of my way to be terrible about it.
Be sure to deliver on that.
Yeah.
Cool. So it sounds like an enthusiastic See the Other Lamb.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The
Um,
other thing I wanted to say, yeah, is that it also looks at consent and non-consensual acts in such a great way. And it also, the thing is that it kind of looks at the sisterhood of a cult. So I guess you could kind of see why it would sort of, in a way, be appealing to someone. But it shows how horrible and wrong and disgusting it really is. But anyway, it's so good. Oh, I could keep going, but yes, very enthusiastic. See it.
Nice. So I think next we're going to talk about a movie that is very different.
Oh, yes.
Totally. A movie that Shauna and I watched last night, and Megan, I know you saw this fairly recently too.
I did
St.
last
Francis,
week, yeah.
which, to give a quick plug to the Coolidge Corner Theater, we rented this and saw this through their virtual screening room that they have. So they have a lot of great indie titles right now that you can rent for a very reasonable fee, and you can rent. I think the rental's for a 2 or 3 day rental. I think that this one was like a 3 day rental, which is pretty sweet. So
3-day, yep.
And you get to support your local theater.
yes,
Yes, and this one, so that's the thing with some of the rentals, like with Bacurau that I talked about last week, half of the proceeds went to the independent theater, half went to the distributor. With St. Francis, 100% of the proceeds went to the Coolidge, which was so nice.
yeah. But St. Francis is quite charming. We were saying last night as we were watching, if IFF Boston was still continuing on per its normal schedule, I could absolutely see this playing at the festival. It's
Oh, 100%.
just a really quality indie dramedy. Like, it's funny, it's sweet, it's, pulls on the heartstrings.
Awkward.
It's just awkward. Yeah, it hits all the right indie, checks all the right indie boxes. I was mixing metaphors. I almost said hits all the right buttons, but that's not quite.
Checks all the right buttons.
Yes. Checks them off. So let's see. Let's do a quick plot summary. So this is about a woman named Bridget who is 34 and feels like her life is a mess. She's like working as a server, and she meets this guy at a party who's really sweet, and they kind of hit it off. And then she gets this new position as a nanny for a couple, a lesbian couple, and they have 2 children. They have Frances, who the film is St. Francis is named after her, and they have a newborn. And so Bridget comes on to look after Frances and to help out around the house. And I mean, shit happens from there. She gets all kind of wrapped up in this family's drama. The women have a strained relationship at the moment. The mother, Maya, is going through postpartum depression, and the other mother, why of course I'm not seeing her name on the IMDb like immediately here. She's Annie, and she is she's like one of those very like, I have like a high powered career and I work a lot, and so she seems kind of like distant and unplugged. So that's kind of like the dynamic that they have going on that Bridget's stepping into. And Frances is a little bit of a handful, to put it lightly. She's very sassy. She's very vocal. She's got a lot to say, and she does not suffer fools. And so Bridget gets kind of a run for her money. She kind of has to learn to keep up with Frances, and they become quite close over the course of the movie, which is really nice to see.
She reminds me of how I was when I was a little kid.
You were a handful.
A nightmare, but yes.
Yes, Frances is a handful. Like when they say like when you look away for a second, like you can't look away for a second, that's Frances. Like there's a scene where Bridget's pushing a stroller and goes to look at her phone, and then Frances falls in a lake, and some random jogger has to like jump
Falls
in
in
and
a
save her.
lake?
Yeah. That
Oh
happens.
my god.
Yeah, so it's just that kind of stuff. Or like an early scene is Bridget takes her to the park to play to get out of like Maya's hair.
Oh my god.
And
it's so good.
Frances wants to get like a sugary snack, and Maya was like, no sugary snacks. So Frances like tries to take the money and run, and then she's like, Bridget grabs her and she's like, this woman's not my mom. She's not my mom. She's trying to like hold me. And then like the next, cuts to them home with like a cop has escorted them home to like make sure that the situation is okay.
That is so something I would have done as a kid. Like classic me.
Yeah, from what I heard, you were quite the handful as a child.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, Frances is cute, but she definitely, like, you could see how she could get on your nerves. So she's just kind of like a handful, and she is, yeah, she, like, in the way that kids can be, like, very direct. But she also cares a lot about her younger brother. Like, I love that she is often wants Bridget to hand her brother to her so that she can hold her brother and help get him to sleep, which I think is cute. Especially like a scene later on where she's holding her brother, and then Maya and Bridget come in, and she just like gives him a thumbs up, like, yeah, I got him to sleep. But I feel like I've been talking a lot. Megan, what did you think of the movie?
I mean, I loved this. I thought it was great. I think that the film really shines and is at its best when Bridget and Frances are together. I think that really is the heart of the film. And I also love Bridget's interactions with Maya too. I think those are great. And like when all of them, when Maya and Bridget and Frances and the baby, they all go out, and then there's that awful woman who's trying to shame her for breastfeeding, and like that scene, like that scene felt a little, and I've actually seen that happen in real life, so I know it obviously does happen, but something about it felt a little forced, but I still loved seeing them together, and I loved seeing Bridget and Frances and their interactions, and I loved how protective Bridget was of the family because she's really become enmeshed in this family. And yeah, and I read something interesting where Kelly O'Sullivan, who plays Bridget and is also the writer of the film, she talked about how she was a nanny for a few years and how it's the weirdest job because you care about these kids and you love them and you really care about them, but then it's like, oop, they go away and you leave, and it's just so bizarre. And she said, I don't know what it's like to be a parent, but I know what it's like to love a child. And I was like, oh, and I just started crying because I was like, that's so lovely. But the other thing we haven't talked about the film, which is the big reason I was excited to see it, is the abortion. I am always here for an abortion in a film, and what I love about this, and this is also based on Kelly O'Sullivan's real life in that she did have an abortion in her early 30s, and what I love is that the abortion is treated so matter-of-factly, like it's yep, I'm pregnant, yep, I'm going to have an abortion. There is no hand-wringing over it, there is no dismay over it. It's like, nope, matter-of-factly, this is what I'm doing, this is my body, this is what's gonna go down. And then it's and it goes through the process of her having a pill abortion, and then how she's bleeding for weeks afterwards. And this film does not shy away from the menstrual and abortion blood, and I am so glad of that, because vaginal blood, listen people, if you are a person if you are a person without a vagina, you may not know, or maybe you do, but blood happens, shit happens, and I am so tired of films that shy away from it and that sanitize it. And I love when a film is just unabashed in its blood, and this film is, like, throughout the film she's constantly bleeding through clothes, she's constantly bleeding through underwear, she has to continuously change her pads, and that is a very real thing, and that does happen. And after you have an abortion, there is a likelihood that you will bleed a lot, and so not a lot, but like you'll spot, and like that. So I loved that, and I loved that that's just such a natural part of everything. And so I loved that, and there were just so many things I loved.
Yeah, I do love the point though where it's it's toward the end of the movie, and it's been happening for a while, and then Annie looks at her and is like, you should see a doctor about that. Like, you really should go to a doctor because you might be anemic or something. Like, you really should take care of that.
But what I love about that scene too is when she's like, you're not horrified that an abortion? And she's like, no, I am horrified that no one in this house knows how to go to a doctor. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, well, because that's a plot point, is that Maya is not getting help for her depression.
Right.
And it's created an issue to the point where, like, Annie is just, on edge and thinks that like maybe Maya's having an affair and possibly with Bridget, and that kind of is like that's into its own thing. But it's a great scene because it forces everybody to kind of confront their issues head on, because even in that scene Bridget breaks down and has a moment where she like processes the abortion, like because there's like like the guy that she's with, Jace, who she meets at a party in the beginning, he has a scene where he's like, I wrote some thoughts down in a journal and I want to talk about it. And she's like,
several pages.
yeah.
Thoughts.
Yeah.
And she's
Dude,
like, I don't want to fucking
reel
hear
it
it.
in.
Yeah. She's like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to think about it. I have no emotion about it. And then like later she's kind of like, okay, yeah, I have some emotion. Like I'm not thinking I'm being hit by this as hard as I, whatever. But yes, I do have thoughts and feelings about this.
Yeah, but sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think that for a lot of people, there's such a stigma around having an abortion that like we kind of maybe want to overcorrect and go in the opposite direction of being like, no, this didn't affect me at all. This wasn't like a bad thing. And like, yeah, there are a lot of people who walk away and don't really have any of those thoughts about it. Like they don't feel any shame or anything like that. And I think that's totally fine. But I do think, it is still kind of a harrowing experience, and there are still certain things to go process through that, which is kind of true whether it's an abortion or even like another kind of medical procedure where you have a bunch of blood coming out of you that's scary and painful. I mean, there's a million different kind of ways that it can come up, and I kind of liked how the film sort of makes a point of being like, you can kind of process it, but it doesn't need to be this whole big like emotionally wrought scene. It can just be like, I have some feelings and then we can move on from it. And I don't know, I liked it. It was a nice way to see it. It was like a realistic way to see it.
I agree. The one thing I will say is that I'm actually completely 100% okay with the course correcting, because we still do not have enough varied depictions of abortion, and it is still obviously so stigmatized in this country as well as globally. So I actually am totally okay if it's, if someone's not agonizing over it or has all these horrible feelings afterwards, because it is just a basic medical procedure. But yeah, but you are 100% right that different people are going to have different feelings. I think my one thing is that, yes, if you actually think about it in a, because people are complex, of course there's going to be a diverse, body of experiences and feelings in that. But we only ever see like people being like, oh God, this is so, oh my God, what do I do? Or in movies, you might not even see someone decide, like that might not even be an option on the table to have an abortion or even a discussion about abortion. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's why I really, really appreciated that she was just like, nope, this is what's happening. This is what I'm doing. Yep. But Shauna, you are absolutely right.
I don't know what else more to add. This was just it was delightful, but it was also like just good drama, and it was funny. And I liked seeing a guy who was not like a dick. Like who was like,
oh, well, that's not true. We haven't talked about that. She has an affair, and she has an affair with a guy who is a dick. So
yeah. But there's a really clear juxtaposition between like how that guy is and how the guy that she's like seeing is, because he's
totally,
he's like a wonderful person, and it's like the first time they have sex, I think that's when she gets her period, and she like bleeds all over everything, and he's totally cool with it, and they're joking about it, and it's fine, and like, that's the kind of person that you really want to have as a partner, or even just to have a fling with. It's like, you can exist and take up space, and your body can do whatever it's gonna do, and you're not gonna be like shamed about it. So I actually, from the beginning, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, this is like a nice, good guy, and we so rarely get to see that. It's like, this is a blueprint. Be like that. Chill.
and that's so funny. I actually didn't see him as a good guy. I just was like, this is the baseline of decency that people should be like. And that is, but you're right that it's hard not to see him. I mean, he is a nice guy too, but it's hard not to immediately see him as a good guy, because because it's so rare to have someone who is a cis dude being like, oh my God, I'm just going to help you clean up the blood, and it's totally fine, and it's totally not creepy. But that's not what makes a good person. Like, that should just be baseline civility and just like decency. But yes, but you are right, because we don't see enough of that in media depictions or in real life.
It feels so special.
Exactly.
No, you're totally right. It's skewed by my sample size.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of douches out there. So, yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be special, but you're absolutely right. It is special. But yeah.
I mean, yeah, maybe men just need like a template. So this is a really good template. Go be like that, and then we can move on from there.
Yes, I completely agree. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the conversation she has with her mother when they go hiking with when she goes hiking with her parents, and how her mother says, "Oh, when you were a baby, I thought I was going to lose my mind and I wanted to swing you by your ankles and smash your head into the wall." And I was like, "Holy fuck." Like,
I saw that's in the trailer.
yeah, and like, but it's such a kind of, I mean, it sounds horrifying, but at the same time, I think it's so great that Bridget then hears that story, and as disturbed as she is, she then tells Maya that, and that makes Maya feel better, that because Maya doesn't feel like this horrible person for not being all, quote, motherly and like wanting to hold her baby all the time. And so, yeah, I think it's great because there are these awful or possibly awful feelings that, we don't talk about and that women aren't allowed to talk about, and there's not space for them to talk about. And, you're just supposed to be this automatically amazing person, an amazing mother. And it's all such bullshit. Like, there's all these constraints put on women that shouldn't be.
Well, you can also be an amazing mother and be just like completely at your wit's end because of a crying baby. I can't speak to this personally because I make it a point to never be in the same room as a baby. So I can only imagine how difficult it is when you're actually legally required to be in the same room as the baby and take care of it.
You're not legally required to be in the same room.
That is correct.
I mean,
you
can be.
I mean, if you have one, you kind of have to be around it. Somebody.
I mean, you should be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I mean, you should be. But, I mean,
Or
that's
making
why there are
arrangements.
baby monitors with sound on them that you can turn off.
Yeah.
Did I say that? Wait a minute.
Who said that? Where did that come from? Yeah. But anyway, yeah, but back to this film. But yeah, I also really appreciated that Bridget is messy and she's not sure what she wants to do with her life, and she thinks about being a poet, but she's kind of not sure. Oh my God, and there's something else to discuss. I totally forgot the issues of class in this too, like when she's at the house and she's bringing Francis back, and then Maya is talking with another mother who happens to be one of Bridget's former college classmates, who's such an asshole, and also on her fridge has Unborn Lives Matter, gag and puke. Like, go fuck yourself, lady. But I do love that the anti-abortion lady is clearly the villain.
Yeah, that scene Megan's referring to is horrible because like Bridget comes in and at first the woman's like, "Oh, I didn't know you lived around here. Well, why don't you?" She's like, "Why don't we hang out?" She's like, "Well, I got work." She's like, just skip it. Just call in sick." And she's like, "I don't think my boss would like that." So then she finds out that Bridget's the nanny, and then she's like, "Oh, Bridget, can you go across the street to my house and make my son a snack?" It's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah,
That
her
lady is
entire
gross.
behavior completely shifts.
Yeah.
It's very gross.
She's like, "Oh, here, Bridget, get me more tea." And
I see. You're not a contemporary. I don't need to treat you like a person. You're just a worker.
Yeah, and that really
Wow.
harkens back to the beginning of the film, which I think the opening is such a great scene where we're just immersed in her life, where she's at a party and this guy is talking to her about how much his life, sucks or whatever because, oh my God, I don't have this or that. And like, he's talking about like houses and jobs and like, and he's like, "What do you do? Like, where's your house?" And she's like, "I don't have one." Like, "What do you do?" I'm a server in a restaurant." And he's like, "Oh, okay, bye." And like, she's at that stage of life where so many, friends are getting married or having babies or having houses, and she's still figuring it out. And, and that's really great because not everybody is on a timeline or on the same timeline, and, nor should we be. So it's great to see a filmic depiction of that.
For sure. So we would all say see St. Francis. It's really good.
Yes.
Which I think probably should bring us to our next movie, and I will attempt to say the name correctly again. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
You did it! Yay!
I cheated. I read. It was an open book test, and I passed.
Listen, open book tests are always accepted, or they should be. Yeah. So speaking of films that we love, I love this. I cannot say enough good things about this film. I fucking love it. And this is also an abortion film. And whereas St. Francis, the abortion is kind of incidental to the film and to the narrative and to the character's life, this entire film is about an abortion, or rather obtaining an abortion. And so this is about a 17-year-old girl named Autumn who is pregnant and wants to get an abortion. And because she lives in rural Pennsylvania, due to abortion restrictions that mandate parental consent, she cannot get an abortion on her own. And so she travels to New York City with her cousin to get an abortion. And that's what the whole film is about. And yeah, and this is a sensitive and unflinching portrayal of that journey. And I love this. And so this is Eliza Hittman's new film. She wrote and directed it. And within the first 10 minutes of the film, we know pretty much everything we need to know about Autumn, about her life, and about what she's dealing with. And because the film opens with a high school talent show, and she's singing and she's playing guitar, and she pauses before she begins her next refrain, and someone in the audience, a dude of course, yells out "slut." And so everyone is like aghast and silent, and she, without missing a beat, starts singing again. And but clearly this is not the first time she's heard this, and which is shitty and awful and slut shaming and gross. But yeah, so we see her with her mom and her stepfather, who's an asshole. And her mother says to her stepfather, like, hey, tell Autumn tell her she did a great job. And he's like, why would I tell someone they did a great job when they always are in a shitty mood? And so her sister turns to her and is like, you did a great job. And so you see her walking to a clinic by herself to get a pregnancy test. And it's very, very clear very early on, this is not a legitimate clinic. This is a CPC, or a crisis pregnancy center. And yeah, exactly. Gross. So yeah, like it's very clear because the woman wearing the lab coat talks about how it's going to be a self-administered test. And then when Autumn looks at it, she's like, is that from the supermarket? And the woman's like, I told you it was going to be self-administered. And it's like such fucking bullshit. And when she gets home, she looks at the brochures that they gave her, and they're about adoption and father's rights, gag, and nothing on abortion options. Yeah, so it's very clear this is a CPC. So then she goes back to have an ultrasound, and the nurse calls it a beautiful baby. And she's like, this is the most magical sound you're ever going to hear. And it's a fetal heartbeat. And it's like just so disgusting. And the camera focuses on Autumn's face and how she looks so panicked and uncomfortable. And when she's out in the office, the reception area, the woman who had the doctor lab coat on earlier is now sitting behind the desk. And she's like, once you hold that baby, all your doubts are going to go away. And she's like, I can't picture that for myself. And then she's like, are you abortion minded? And I'm like, oh my God, this is just getting more and more horrifying. So then it cuts to her after she shows her a video about abortion being about killing babies, which is, oh my God, so disgusting. But this is what CPCs do. They're revolting and disgusting, and they're masquerading as legitimate clinics while just trying to, they're a sham trying to manipulate and control women, and it's disgusting. But anyway, so it cuts to Autumn Googling abortions under 18 in Pennsylvania, and she looks up how to do a self-induced abortion. So she swallows a bunch of pills, and then we see this incredibly harrowing scene where she's looking in the mirror and she's punching her stomach repeatedly. And we later see her bare stomach covered in bruises. Like it's just horrible. And it's so sad that she'll do whatever it takes so she's not pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so she decides she's going to get an abortion, and she's got to go to New York to do it. And her cousin, who she works with, is helping her. And there's this kind of great scene where they work together and they're both like cashiers. And her cousin tells their boss, like, hey, she's not feeling well, I gotta take her home. And he's like a creep, and he's like, oh, well, if you left, I'd miss you. And like throughout the entire film, you see adult men being super creepy, especially to her cousin, but also to Autumn as well. And like a guy, like this old guy at the checkout, she's like, oh, I see you're having a party. And she's just like making conversation. He's like, do you want to come over? And it's like, it's so gross. And it's just, And the film really illuminates how treacherous the world is for women and girls to navigate, because you have all that, you know, sexist bullshit. But then you also have the CPCs, which are also being predatory and intrusive. So it's just gross all around. So the women decide they're going to go, the young women decide they're going to go to New York. They get on a bus at like the crack of dawn. And then on the bus, a guy is creepy again. Like, you cannot escape these creepy dudes. They're everywhere. And the film very much does not shy away from that. Yeah. Like, there's a scene later in the film on the subway where they get off the subway because it's late at night and this guy's like jacking off. Like, it's just disgusting. But, anyway, so they make it to New York City, they make it to Port Authority, and there's like a great montage of like them putting money in the machine, which keeps spitting out the 20. And I'm like, oh my God, I hate whenever I go to New York and I have to get money for the subway. It's such a pain in the ass. But anyway, so they finally get to the clinic. They get to Planned Parenthood, thank God, and where it's finally going to be some accurate information, some good shit. And they find out, or Autumn finds out, that she's actually not 10 weeks along like the CPC told her. She's actually 18 weeks along.
I was worried you were
going to Yeah. And because she's in the second trimester, they won't do the abortion for her at this particular Planned Parenthood because it's in Brooklyn, but they refer her to the Manhattan one. And Autumn's like, why can't I just do it here? And they're like, and she's like, I'm so sorry, we just don't do that here. She's like, but you can get in tomorrow. And they don't have anywhere to stay. So the two girls are like trying to sleep at Port Authority, but they kick you out at 1 a.m. You can't be there from 1 to 5. So they ride the subway, but then there's that creepy guy jacking off. So then they end up at an arcade and they're playing at the arcade because, you know, they're still kids. And although I would be at an arcade too, which has nothing to do with being a kid. But anyway, it's great to see them having fun. And then you see them having pastries the next day. And so they finally get to the Manhattan Planned Parenthood, and there's of course a huge blockade of protesters out there, as there would be. But the one thing that I'm surprised the film didn't do, because there was clearly a lot of detail and research to this, and Eliza Hittman has said that she worked with Planned Parenthood and like talked to the Planned Parenthood in Keystone in Pennsylvania, and as well as I think the one in New York. But there are no clinic escorts, which is really surprising because there are always clinic escorts, especially at the Manhattan and New York Planned Parenthood. So it's very surprising. But so you see them inside, and then you see her talking to first a financial counselor, which is great. And then you see her with another counselor who tells her that it's going to be a 2-day procedure because she's in the second trimester. And then there's this amazing scene where she's going down the line of like asking her medical questions. And here's where the title of the film comes from, because she has to answer these questions and she's like, you need to answer, or she's like, please answer, never, rarely, sometimes, or always. And you know, she asks her when she first before that, she asks her when she first started having sex. She asked her what kind of sex she's had, how many partners, those kinds of things. Then she asks her questions about her relationships. And she asks her, has your partner ever refused to wear a condom? And yes, that has sometimes happened. And then she asks her if her partner has ever frightened or intimidated her. And there's a moment where she looks like she's going to break. And she says, why are you asking me these questions? And the woman who's the counselor is like, I just want to make sure you're safe and that you're okay. And she like barely can answer that question. And then she asks her if a partner has ever hit her, and she pauses and looks down and also just cannot answer. And then the counselor asks if her partner has ever made her have sex when she didn't want to, and she's just crying at this point. And the counselor asks if anyone has ever forced her to have a sexual act, and she says yes. And it's gutting and just awful. But it's such a, unfortunately, universal experience for so many, women and girls. And this scene is just, it's incredible. And the film goes on from there. Like basically they wait another night and then the next day she has the second part of a procedure because it's a 2-day process. But the film really painfully but beautifully shows the lengths people have to go to for healthcare, and abortion obviously is healthcare. And, access to abortion, whether financial or geographic, is such a barrier to so many people, especially poor people and people of color, especially people in rural areas. And Eliza Hittman said in an interview with Polygon that she was inspired to write this film after she read about Savita Halappanavar, who died because she couldn't get an abortion in Ireland. And she was going to have this take place in Ireland, but she decided because of funding issues to have it filmed in the US. And I'm actually so glad she did, because there is such a disparity in the US of access to abortion. Like, yes, of course there's Roe, which is, unfortunately being chipped at the state level, every year, every month. But for so many people,
and at the Supreme Court, we might lose
absolutely. But for so many people, they just don't have access, and they have to travel these long distances. And the longer you wait to get an abortion, the more expensive it is. The further along you go on in your in the pregnancy. And so it's just, these are such huge barriers. And I love that we see a film that looks at this journey and that looks at these barriers in a very, just like I said earlier, unflinching way. And this is, this film is just so incredible. The acting is incredible, cinematography, everything. I just loved this.
It sounds really good. That the scene you were talking about in the clinic, though, it sounds gutting. It sounds intense.
Yeah.
But raw and honest, and it sounds like a good movie. Not an easy watch, but important.
Absolutely important. And the thing of it is that so often when I'm watching a film, because I have friends who've worked in clinics, I have friends who are clinic escorts who have, worked with abortion funds and volunteered with them. I've raised money with abortion funds before. And so, so often films don't get it right as far as these details. And this film, like I said, except for maybe the clinic escort part, this film gets it so right. And this is also another case of, it's so refreshing to see a depiction of someone who wants to get an abortion and she doesn't hem and haw over it. She knows what she wants. She knows her body. She knows what's right for her. And this is what she wants to do and has to do. And it just should be easier. It shouldn't be this fucking hard. And I love that this film shows that.
Sounds really good. It sounds like yet another enthusiastic C.
Oh my God, yes. It's so good. This is easily one of my, already this year is shaping up to be amazing for film. This is already one of my favorite films of the year.
Oh yeah, Megan, where were you able to see it? Is it available to stream anywhere?
It's available to stream, but it is $19.99. So it is a pricey pay. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that brings us to the main event. We're going to be talking about the Netflix docuseries, How to Fix a Drug Scandal, which is a 4-episode series on Netflix right now. And it's particularly relevant to us here in Massachusetts because this is where all the action went down. This is where the quote-unquote scandal went down. And Shauna is our resident expert. So I guess I'll let you start and tell us a little bit about the series and about the scandal. And I'm putting one of those parentheses with an S next to scandal.
He means at the end, like scandals.
Yes.
So yeah, as a little bit of a preface, as an attorney, I've actually had a lot of involvement in the case because I found out about it. This story about the first scandal broke before I was in law school, and I became kind of obsessed with it because I had been working in a virology lab in college. So like I was already annoyed from a how dare you violate lab protocol perspective. And then it just sort of became this like really salacious, crazy thing. And then in law school, I did both of my internships at the public defender, kind of working with the drug lab cases. And then I did a fellowship with the ACLU of Massachusetts where I followed both of those cases kind of through some of the major developments that you end up seeing in the docuseries. So basically what happened, there were 2 drug lab scandals. And by that, I mean, when you get arrested for having like possession of a drug of some sort, they have to prove that the drug is actually a drug, that it's an illegal substance. So they send it to these labs and then they do a test to kind of see what it is. So we have 2 different scandals. The first one that broke was a really crazy story about this chemist who basically was just faking drug test results for about 9 years. And she would do like an absurd amount of testing, like 4 or 5 times the amount that like any human being would ever be able to process. And instead of making people raise eyebrows and look with concern, they just promoted her, and she was like kind of everyone's like go-to girl. And so she kind of did it because she felt like it made her feel very important. And then also because she got a lot of accolades, and she got to be really like close and buddy with a lot of police and prosecutors. So there was a lot of like self-interest there, which is the worst thing for the criminal justice system to have to deal with, because that's the kind of issue that's going to infect kind of every level of the system and really preclude you to get justice. So then the second scandal, which is going on at around the same time, is another chemist who, much more unfortunately, she started using drugs around the time that she started working at the lab. And so she was using drugs for basically her entire tenure there. So that was around 8 years. So you have these two ridiculous, crazy, situations going on at the same time. So one broke a little bit before the other. And one of the things that the documentary shows, although I don't think very well, is how the fact that the first one was such a big deal, it was so highly publicized, had really like bad implications for how they handled the second one. And I think that's one of the, I'm really happy that the docuseries is out. I'm really excited that it's on Netflix. I'm really excited that it came out right now when everyone's looking desperately for something to watch.
Yeah, it was in the top 10. I think it was number 6 at one point when we saw it on Netflix for the US.
Yeah, so I've been outraged by these scandals for since 2013. And I'm waiting for like everyone else to finally start getting outraged with me. And I want to be very clear about this, because this is, I think, one of the areas that the docuseries kind of stumbles on. They spend a lot of time with these two chemists, and they spend more time with the chemist who had become addicted. And I find that very frustrating, because the story, like, it's crazy what she did. Like, she was basically making crack at her desk and at her workstation, and no one noticed.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's crazy, and like, you can't believe that. But the thing that's really important here is not what the chemists do. It's that you have these environments, 2 different environments completely unrelated from each other, that enabled somebody to get away with this kind of stuff for that long, for almost a decade each, separately in separate cases.
Western and Eastern Mass are these 2 labs. So one's here in Boston and one was out in Amherst.
Yeah, and collectively they handle pretty much all the drug testing in the state. So then, like, that's one of my major concerns. But the other thing is, it's not about the crime, it's about the cover up. I can't trust this administration if they have this situation pop up where, you know, what ended up being 35,000 dismissals, give or take, that we were able to get, that they looked at this and they were kind of like, well, let's try to minimize it and sweep it under the rug. So what's really fascinating about this case is that it took almost an additional decade and several millions of dollars to be able to actually adjudicate all of these cases. And we were able to secure dismissals in the vast majority of them. So like I said before, it's about 35,000 dismissals of wrongful convictions, which is the largest mass dismissal of convictions in U.S. history, probably in world history.
Wow.
So it's a very exciting, groundbreaking, because, I mean, criminal cases are not ever really handled like civil, like class action lawsuits. Like, that's not a thing. You always handle them one at a time. So it's kind of interesting because they had this huge scandal break and then another huge scandal break. And you're kind of watching a bunch of attorneys, and this is something that the docuseries does show, trying to figure out how you move forward with this when there is no framework for a like criminal class action suit. So it's really interesting. I think it does a really good job of at least letting you see the defense attorneys, who were just incredible throughout all of this. The entire reason that the second scandal broke is because of the dogged persistence of one defense attorney who just like would not let it go. Basically for an incredibly long time, for well over a year. the Attorney General's office refused to allow him to see evidence of the basically of all of the reasons that they were prosecuting the second chemist who had been using drugs. They prevented him from seeing any of that evidence that pertained to a bunch of cases that he was working on. And so he had clients that were in jail that were waiting on this evidence, and they weren't able to see it. And so you have people who are stuck in jail because the Attorney General's office didn't want to give over this evidence. And that's the kind of thing, it's the most breathtakingly egregious conduct that I've ever seen from other attorneys. And I think that's one of the things that they really could have spent a lot more time focusing on. So like that's kind of my perspective on it. I think there was a lot of really amazing work done, and I think it does a good job of giving you sort of general insight into that. I would have made this docuseries twice as long. And I think everything that you see in like the last 35 minutes of the last episode, you could have stretched out into like another 4 or 5 different episodes, because really, I mean, it took years. It took years and years and years to be able to actually figure out the process and manage to get the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts to just dismiss these cases. And I think it's very interesting, because this is some of the most ridiculous, insane prosecutorial misconduct that I've ever seen and that most people will ever see. And no one's been held accountable for it in any way, shape, or form. I know that there's a pending complaint with the Board of Bar Overseers, who's kind of like our like ethical body. It's been pending for like a year. Like, I have no idea if anything's going to come of that. The attorneys who are involved still have like high-ranking government positions where they make lots and lots of money. You know, like they all somehow were able to have careers made off of this. And one of my favorite moments that I got to enjoy in all of this, and they do show some of it, is they actually ended up having all of these attorneys come in and testify about their involvement in this case. And I actually got to see some of them crying and breaking down on the stand and apologizing profusely. I got to see some of them lying through their teeth and thinking that they were doing a really good job testifying, which was truly amazing. You know, and I got to actually watch pretty much the only accountability that's ever going to be doled out in this case. I mean, it remains to be seen what happens with that part of the BBO complaint, but yeah, so I think if the public gets really angry about this, maybe we'll get to actually see some movement on that. So I definitely highly recommend that everybody see it, even though I think that this docuseries could have been done much better.
Yeah, it's from what I can tell, it spends a lot of time on the chemists and not enough time on the issues. I mean, one of the people who was like the lead person from the prosecution, they barely touch on her name until very late in the docuseries, and then she comes up when you're talking about the part where they're all testifying and lying and like basically you're figuring out all the different ways that they covered it up. Then her name finally comes up in the middle of that.
Yeah,
Kaczmarek and Foster. Yeah.
Kaczmarek. So Kaczmarek had a massive role in the Ferrick scandal. And it's amazing to me how they managed to not actually show anything about her until the very, very end. Because she's kind of the one that was running the show. And actually, it's really interesting because one of the major issues in this case was the judge in that case basically decided that there was like a 6-month period that she had been using drugs for. So they basically got rid of the cases for within that 6-month period that she was testing, but they didn't get rid of any of the cases from before then. And that whole 6-month period, like she basically made that up out of nowhere. We were able to eventually see like all of the email chains back and forth from everyone in the office. And that's how we were able to determine, you know, she basically said, well, we'll just say it's like 6 months, and she has no reason for thinking that. And as a matter of fact, within several days of Ferrick being arrested, they knew for a fact that there were several other like very suspicious cases of different kinds of medications and drugs that were like switched or that didn't look the same way that they should have, or there was the wrong number of pills in a bag. And there's actually an email where she was like, oh, maybe her back hurt and she just took some oxys. Like for some reason that's better.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And like there's so much more involvement that she had. And they don't really show any of it. And I'm kind of shocked. I'm wondering if that's like one of those major decisions that a bunch of really good footage ended up on the cutting room floor. But that's kind of one of the areas where I feel like, I'm sitting with my husband watching this and having to pause it every like 3 minutes to be like, here's another thing that they didn't tell you. Here's another thing they didn't tell you. Here's another thing that we wrote about in our amicus brief that just somehow didn't make it in here. And some of it's like salacious, interesting, like tidbits, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I that's the kind of funny thing is that like you're not in this documentary, but there are several parts that they show where you're actually there in the courtroom, but you're just not in the frame of the camera.
Yeah, for most of the hearings, I'm in the room for almost every single like courtroom hearing that you'll see, but I usually sit in the back on like the right side, and they were mostly filming in a way that showed the left side. And then there was a couple times that I was sitting with other people from the public defender's unit, like kind of in where the jury box would be on the side. So it's like I just narrowly missed being in the shot like a million times.
I kept looking for you, Shauna. I kept looking.
Yeah, I looked for me too. And I'm like, I think I'm sitting next to the person on camera right now in that scene. So.
Yeah, and like the scene toward the end where the ACLU, the team that you worked with when you were there, like you guys secured the dismissal, and Matt Siegel from the ACLU is speaking on camera, and you were standing to his left, which is like literally just outside the frame.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I did get on the news for like a quarter of a second.
Yes.
My mom obviously recorded it and sent me like screenshots and everything. So like I was there for a little bit. If you ever happen to find that footage, I do have a photo somewhere. But yeah, like I was involved in writing the amicus brief, which I think went a long way to convincing the judge. So one of the things that they do show in the doc, which is really crazy, is the judge, not one of the Supreme Judicial Court judges, but one of the judges who handled one of the scandals. He basically talked about the breathtaking prosecutorial misconduct that he found. And it's one of those things that as a defense attorney, it's like, I know that this stuff happens all the time, and that's why it makes me so angry. But I never get to be in a room where anybody else believes me that it's happening. And so for a judge to actually like write down on paper that he sees it and he understands that this is what's going on was so vindicating. Because, I mean, they just tried to ignore this and pretend that it wasn't a big deal for so many years. And, now finally we've been able to get the smallest possible measure of justice,
Yeah. I mean, and obviously I knew all about this because we're together, and this has been an important part of your life for the last however many years. Longer than you've known me. So over 5 years, like at least 7, 8, 9 years for you. That this
since like late 2012, early 2013. Yeah, I've been following it ever since then because just as a like science-y nerd, I've always found it really interesting how the criminal justice system has like no concept of how to deal with science. And everyone is like, oh, I don't like it. It's too many numbers and too many like theoretical things that I have to think about, and it's just not worth my time. So they kind of don't treat it properly, and I think this is one of the fallouts of that.
So I have to wonder, Dave and Megan, how much did you know about the scandal? Like, were you aware of it? Did you know the magnitude of it? Like, watching this doc, was it kind of like, was it mind-blowing for you?
Well, I remember all the Annie Ducan stuff because that was the case that I think got more press, partly because it was Boston. Yeah, that I remember. I didn't know anything about Sonia Farrick, so which is the more compelling, fucking crazy, outrageous, to have here's the thing about addicts. If you're an addict and you work at a place and you have coworkers, they know you're an addict. I mean, there's nobody who's like, really? He was smoking crack for 5 years? I had no idea. There's none of that. You know, you might not be totally certain, but when you hear about the lengths she went to get high on the job, it's just like, for Christ's sake.
So as somebody who has ADHD and takes a stimulant, and they actually do mention this in the doc, that like there is sort of a performance enhancing effect that you can get. So I could see in this particular instance with this particular kind of substance, her not necessarily showing the signs until she talks about how she had to get rid of the standard and had to start like synthesizing her own drugs in the lab because she wasn't able to get the standard anymore.
Yeah, smoking crack in the bathroom and making it at a workstation. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff you're like,
that's where it's like, really?
You should be noticing these things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I was going to say, though, is, I mean, chiming in about addiction and addicts, the one thing is that addicts are very good at keeping secrets and hiding their shit. So, yeah, I would say it's not surprising to me that people might not know in the beginning, but yes, eventually when it gets more out of hand, you'd think someone would know. So I also was I knew a little bit about it just from the Dukan case, but yeah, I also didn't know, or I didn't know the scope of it. So seeing how massive it was mind blowing. And also it was really funny seeing so much about Amherst and UMass, since I am a UMass Amherst alum and I was there. And so that was also just really like weird to see. But I have to say, this is kind of something sort of off topic, but not, but this is how the whole docuseries starts. I have to say one of my favorite parts is when, and I can't think of the person's name who says it, but when someone says, you know, we think of Massachusetts as this liberal outpost, and when it comes to criminal justice, it's just not. And then they continue to say, Eastern Massachusetts and Western Massachusetts are two completely different places with different legal systems and different media. And as someone who lived in Western Massachusetts for 10 years and has lived in Boston for about 15 years, I can attest to that personally, that it is completely different, absolutely different. With Northampton and Amherst being slight liberal, well, they are liberal outposts, but they are particularly liberal outposts. The rest of it is absolutely conservative and is just so vastly different than the Boston, Eastern Massachusetts area. And so it was so refreshing to have someone say that, and also to frame this entire case in that way as kind of an intro to all of this, which, yes, is shocking and mind-blowing, the scope of it, and it's just wild.
Yeah. Yep, I can confirm that through my practice also. I mean, it is a really very odd place to practice in, because people do think it's liberal, but it's not when it comes to criminal justice, not ever. I mean, you know, it's amazing in a state that's as white as our state, how few white people get in trouble in comparison to how many black people get in trouble.
Oh, yeah. Right?
It's I mean, all you have to do is look around a courtroom and look at like some basic statistics, and you know, there is obviously a giant racism issue here. And I think that's one of the things that's so frustrating, is that these cases, you know, they mostly affected people of color, mostly black people.
Yep.
And the thing that's really infuriating about it, and they do touch on this in the documentary, is that like so many of these cases, the DAs spent years and years and years fighting to keep from dismissing them. And they would be like, oh, and especially when this first broke with Dukin, they were like, oh, there's going to be this crime wave of all these defendants that are going to get out, and they're going to commit all these crimes, and it's just going to be horrible because we're letting all these like scary predators on the street. That never materialized. And when we actually were able to finally do the breakdown of the cases in 2017, over 5 years after this whole fucking thing started, you know, we find out that like 60% of the crimes are just possession cases, which means that it's literally just having the thing. It's not even trafficking. It's not even intent to sell, nothing like that. It's literally just owning it. You know, which is really ridiculous, because that's not somebody who's going to necessarily be predisposed to violence or committing any other kinds of crimes. And then the even more shocking thing is that over 90% of these cases were low-level misdemeanors, which Matt Siegel, who is a freaking genius, and I love him, he put it very well that, you know, even prosecutors made the decision that these cases were not that big of a deal, which is why they were pursued in district court. Like, these are stupid, small, low, not a big deal cases. And it took us millions and millions of dollars and years and years and so much writing just to get to the point where the district attorneys had no choice but to get rid of them. So, you know, it's really stupid when you look at people who have like really strong criminal justice platforms. This is the kind of thing that they're wasting your taxpayer money on. And I think that it's a really important thing to highlight that, because if you're going to be corrupt, like, I understand if you want to fight and do what you can for, like, you know, an actual bad murder charge, which is like what you see on TV, but not this. Like, this is not the time you go to bat. Like, just let these cases go. And so, I mean, you know, it took us years and years and years to get people to agree. You know, and it is really funny to see people like Maura Healey now being like, well, yeah, we want to be just. And yeah, the way she handled all of this and the way that Martha Coakley handled all this was horrific. And I'm saying it because the docuseries didn't.
Yeah.
And they could have.
I mean, Martha Coakley's just kind of a shitbag. I mean, I know that, you know, she's a fucking lobbyist for Juul now. So, you know, fuck
She was
her.
at DraftKings before that. And actually she was working for...
Oh my God, what?
Yeah, she was working for DraftKings when she taught a class about policing in the 21st century.
Wow.
That I took. And we spent a little while on broken windows policing. And she was like, oh, this is this really cool theory. And I don't know if anybody in our listeners has not heard of it. It's this idea of, like, if you focus on really small bullshit, no big deal cases like jumping turnstiles and like breaking somebody's window, then it degrades the system and it degrades like the community, and it makes it kind of like nobody will care about their belongings and nobody will take a sense of ownership. And so you want to force people to, I don't know, behave in these really small picayune ways so that they respect their own community more. And that's how you stop bigger crimes. So it's kind of like a triple up policing situation. It makes absolutely no sense. It's complete and total bullshit. All of us were sitting in class just rolling our eyes like, are you seriously giving us a packet about broken windows policing? Like, one of the most toxic philosophies I've ever seen.
You know what's absolute bullshit about that too? Just to kind of pile on to how shitty it is. That,
please.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know Shauna, I know you're familiar with anthropology and you know, sociology. So, but yeah, I mean, there is a arguably legitimate theory that people care more about their communities when they are tended to. But that is so they're like taking a kernel of potential truth and bastardizing it and warping it to try to justify this egregious human rights violations in, you know, the criminal justice world, and it's disgusting and revolting.
Yeah, like the way that you accomplish that, the way you use that kind of thinking is like, you build a community garden.
Yes.
You don't arrest everybody that you can as often as you can.
Correct. Right. You have like garbage pickup, and you have like, you take care of sidewalks, and that has to do with town and city government taking care of the community. Right. It's not punishing marginalized people.
Yeah.
Ugh, fucking
exactly.
bullshit. God.
Yep. And it's that kind of stupid low-level bullshit that caused thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this state to be saddled with records. And as soon as you have a criminal record, you have a target on your back, and that's going to follow you around forever. And so the smallest, tiniest amount of justice we could possibly provide is getting those stupid charges off people's records, getting police off their backs, you know. And sure, it took so long that I don't even know if it's relevant for a lot of people, but like...
Yeah, well, most of them did their time. They said most of them had already served time and were out by the time all this was being litigated. But the fact that they could get this expunged from the record in a lot of cases was a big deal for them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this scandal is crazy. Scandals. I'll use the parentheses with the S.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, but I'm glad to see that there's something out there now that kind of, lets more people know. I wish it was done better, which I know you wish it was done better too.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for people wanting to watch it, I would resist the urge to spend a lot of time focusing on the chemists themselves and try to really understand the story from the perspective of like a systematic failure. Because that's really where the real nut of the story was. And I have to say, I read something from the director before I watched it, and she mentioned like, oh, the thing that I saw from this is it's a story about addiction. And I'm like, oh God, you just missed it entirely. Like that's fine that you got that from it, but you obviously, I don't know. I just feel like if they had been in the room that I was in, which they obviously were because they were filming, I don't know how they missed like this whole giant horrible travesty occurring right in front of them and still spent 2 whole episodes talking about the chemists alone.
Well, that's what kind.
I'm annoyed about it.
I don't blame you, because that's what kind of blows my mind. I mean, yes, addiction is insidious and awful, and we should talk about it, and we should talk more about it, and there should be less stigma and all of those things. And yes, you could argue that catalyzed this whole thing, but that's not really what made shitty shit worse, because you're 100% right. It's the system. It's the system that broke down. It's a system that failed all of these people, particularly marginalized people, and it's a system that continually dehumanizes and oppresses them and punishes them over and over and over again. And so why the fuck wouldn't you focus on that?
Oh, and I want to add, in the 4th I'm so mad about this. In the 4th episode, there's like some cheeky little interviews with people who are like, oh, we could have resolved this so quickly by forcing all of our employees to do drug tests. And I'm like, okay. That's really funny that you're talking about that. I guess that makes sense when it comes to the Ferrick scandal, but you are skipping an entire other fucking scandal that has nothing to do with being on drugs. So good job documentary for trying to put forward this like really simple, just fix it all mentality when you missed like the entire point.
Hey everybody, Dave here. This is about the point in the episode where my internet connection went dead, and so Evan, Megan, and Shauna are going to wrap things up, and please excuse this strange musical interlude.
Okay, this is Evan coming back here. Unfortunately, Dave lost his connection while we were in the middle of hearing what he had to say about the documentary, which we're super bummed. And obviously, we look forward to hearing more from him about what he thinks. But given the fact that Dave unfortunately cannot reconnect, we're just gonna we'll wrap the show. We'll bring it to a conclusion. So this week we would say see all of the things, see everything we've talked about. See how to fix a drug scandal, see St. Francis, The Other Lamb, and Never Rarely, Sometimes Always.
Yes.
But before we sign off, we just wanted to celebrate the fact that this is our 300th episode.
Yay!
Yes. It's quite the milestone for us. We've been doing this coming up on 6 years, which is crazy.
Wow.
And Megan, you've been with us for a while now too, which is crazy to think about.
I know, it's so exciting.
But we love doing the show, and we'll keep doing it as long as technology allows us to.
Don't tempt it.
I know.
Don't jinx us.
We already lost Dave.
I know.
No!
Let's blame the COVID.
Yes. But yes, we love doing the show, and we really love you guys, and we appreciate the fact that you've stuck with us even through this crazy time. And we're gonna keep going, power on past 300, and who knows where we'll stop.
300 more at least. I know. I have to say that this is especially now with everything happening in the world. This is my moment of joy, of sanity, of normalcy, being with you guys, talking with you guys about, films which we all love to talk about and discuss and debate and dissect and all of those great things. And I know for me personally, it's been such a privilege and an honor to be a part of Spoiler Piece. And I have so much admiration and respect for you guys. And I just love that I get to be a part of it too. And so, I just echo everything that Evan says, and listeners, it's so wonderful that you allow us into your homes and, wherever you're hearing us. And it's such a great honor. So thank you.
And as a listener, I just want to say that this show rocks. And I'm saying that even though I love Evan, I would not listen if I didn't like the show.
I believe that. I know you wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people who do podcasts, and I don't listen to all of them. Some, but not all.
Yeah. But yeah, we're thrilled that you joined the show, Megan, and that you're having a blast.
Yeah, you're
and
awesome.
I would also say that this is a moment of sanity during an insane time. It's fun to get together with you guys and talk about movies. And I'm glad that we can still at least watch from home. That's not been taken away from us.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we lose the internet, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Oh my God.
That'd be chaos.
The world is just end. Yeah, that will just end the world right there if the internet goes away.
Like, as long as I have food and access to the internet, I will be fine indefinitely. But if I lose either of those things, I'm gonna be really upset.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, we're super bummed that Dave fell off,
I know.
but I'm sure he'll record some parting words. So I guess let's bring it back around. Thank you for listening to our 300th episode. You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts. You can also find us at our website, which is SpoilerPiece. Yes, it is. And there's a bunch of ways you can get in touch with us. We're on Facebook. We're Spoiler Piece Theater. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter and on Instagram. And we've developed a very active Instagram presence. That's right, Megan. You've been doing an awesome job with that.
Thanks.
And yes, our social media guru. And yeah, if you want to get in touch with us, you can also send us an email. We're spoilerpiece@gmail.com, and you can also give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
Yeah.
Leave us a message. That rings my phone. If it's someone I know, I'll try not to pick up just in case you're calling the hotline.
Which is why I've never left a message. Because he just answers.
But we really appreciate you listening to the show. And if you like the show, please rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. That'll take you to wherever you want to review us. You can review us on Podchaser right now. They're doing a real cool promotion there where they're actually they're actually donating money for each review that's written on Podchaser.
I know, that's so great.
A charity. That's really cool. And then if you really, really like us, you can sign up for our Patreon. And so if you go to patreon.com/spoilerpiece, you can sign up. For as low as $5 a month, you get to vote in polls. You get to listen to exclusive audio, like this week's selection. We talked about Brother from Another Planet. Is that the name of the movie? I'm already blanking on it.
That is the name.
Yes. And many others. And then there's all kinds of great stuff on Patreon. So definitely check that out as well. And so my name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BAFCA and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. And you can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
And my name is Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer and critic, editor of Bitchflix, and I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can find me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld and on Letterboxd and Instagram at TheOpinionS.
My name is Dave Riedel. You can read me at Salt Lake City Weekly, and you can find me on the interwebs, Instagram, Letterboxd, Twitter, at Dave Sees Movies.
And I just want to say thank you again, Shauna, for joining us and for imparting your wisdom on us about the drug lab scandals here in Massachusetts. Is there anywhere you want to tell people to look for you? No?
No, I mean, I'm not really active on anything. I only really use Twitter for yelling at companies and holding them accountable.
Yeah,
for
so
small
if you happen to see Flippin' Sushi on Twitter yelling at somebody, give her a retweet. Give her
Small
an angry retweet. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you guys soon.
Bye.